Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I have kind of a funny prompt here. Today we're going to be looking at the 5 most random comic book collections in my collection. I was inspired to do this list basically by just trying to go through my collection and seeing things that I haven't pulled out in some time in some cases, and others that are just kind of odds and ends that don't really fit with the rest of my collection. I thought it'd be fun to showcase some of those for you today. Maybe you'll get a recommendation for something you haven't expected. At any rate, go ahead and settle in and thank you for joining me. Before we dive into the list, I do want to shout out our channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, I highly encourage you to check out their website. You can find a link for it in this video's description, and if you see anything there you like, you can actually use my discount code at checkout, TheComicBookReport, to save $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a fantastic way to support this channel. Thank you for considering. Now let's get started with today's list. First on today's list, in no particular order, we have Powerless, written by Matt Chernus and Peter Johnson, with art from Michael Gaydos. So this is a really interesting paperback. The essential story here is that a man wakes up out of a coma in presumably our real world or some version of it, but his memories are all of the Marvel 616 universe, and he feels a little off balance in his modern world, but he finds himself coming to terms with some of these big Marvel heroes in their civilian identities in a world where they aren't heroes. I think the predominant characters they showcase to this end are Peter Parker, who in the Marvel Universe is of course Spider-Man, Matt Murdock, who is of course Daredevil, and Logan, who is the Wolverine. But again, in this universe, they're just sort of people. But it's interesting to see in this parallel world, there are shades of this other kind of calling or who they're meant to be, and our main character feels like he's in a position to maybe nudge them toward maybe what he assumes is his destiny. We have him being kind of an influential player here in a way, but it's a really interesting character study on what makes these characters, and we have this kind of interesting fish out of water psychological narrative following our main character. I think some of the character interpretations here are maybe a bit different than you've ever seen some of the characters portrayed before. The art we have from Gaydos is absolutely eye-popping. It's gritty, it's interesting. I think he did some of the art for Alias, that Brian Michael Bendis series following Jessica Jones, if I'm not mistaken. This series is at times pretty bleak, and it has some twists and turns I didn't expect, and some other fun Marvel Easter eggs and characters thrown in there, even if it does follow primarily Peter Parker, Matt Murdock, and Logan, as described earlier. Funny enough, I did see some parallels drawn online between this Powerless miniseries and something like Marvel 1985, which was included in the Fantastic Four by Mark Millar and Brian Hitch Omnibus a while ago. That series is about a young boy who sees Marvel characters emerge into his real world from the comics. It has that same kind of magic realism, surrealistic quality to it in some ways. I think in many ways Powerless is maybe perhaps a little bit more grounded, but it did still have that weird kind of world-bending surreality that I did find kind of captivating. I do think if you're a fan of Marvel 1985, this might be worth checking out. I think for me this is a random entry in my collection as it doesn't really fit anywhere, I would say. It really feels standalone. Again, the closest comparison I have is Marvel 1985, and that's not even a perfect comparison. I don't think I follow much of these creators in any form either, and yet I just found the cover of this book pretty captivating, and it sounded like an interesting premise, which is why I picked it up all those years ago. Certainly a random entry. I don't think I've reviewed this on the channel. If you would be interested in that, let me know in the comments. I'm happy to do so. If you've read Powerless, I'd like to hear your feedback as well. It would just be fun to get some more conversation about this interesting collection. Next on the list, we have Cover by Brian Michael Bendis and David Mack. This was released from Dark Horse, and it's definitely one of the most random books in my collection. To date, I don't really have many Dark Horse books at all, and this is definitely an indie title I'm not sure I would have discovered if I had not met David Mack and he was promoting this book. I did get it signed by him, which was a real joy. He was an absolute gem to meet and discuss with, and I found myself really liking this collection. I am a fan of both David Mack and Brian Michael Bendis, so I had a feeling this would be more or less a slam dunk, but what I found in these pages was definitely something more than I had expected. Cover tells the tale of a comic book creator who finds himself pulled into a world of, let's call it, espionage. It's a total kind of spy, international political thriller wrapped around a really intimate character study of a creative, and I just really liked it. This is unlike anything I've ever read. There's so many layers to the storytelling, and the artwork here from Mack has a lot of experimentation in the best of ways. We even do get a couple instances of Mack's kind of watercolor, beautiful style that I like to see, as well as a couple other different art styles, which I like to see showcased across this book. I'm not sure when exactly I'm going to release this list, but I actually did prepare a review for this comic itself, and that should be coming out in the next week or two, so stand by if it's not already out and you're interested just as I'm flipping through here. Never fear, I did do a full review. But yeah, this is a really fun book. Like I said, I think this is really something for those fans of the kind of spy thriller, but if like me, you're also a fan of the comic book industry and would like maybe a little look inside, this book is also surprisingly meta. It's not too in your face, but I feel like I got a little bit of insight into maybe what some comic creators deal with or think about with Comic-Con experiences or the creative process, and I really found that pretty illuminating. Overall, this was a really fun book. I'm not sure if they're going to make more in this series. I think it reads well as a standalone, but I think the door is open if they wanted to continue this in the future. I, for one, enjoyed it, but like I said, it's quite random. I think if I didn't meet Mack and he wasn't promoting this on his table, this might have just slipped under my radar. I've never really heard other people discussing this book too much, and I think that's a shame because it is a fun read, especially if you're looking for something a little bit off the beaten path. In addition to being this interesting spy thriller and reflection on the comic book creative process, there's also this interesting kind of slice of life aspect to it as well. This is really a genre-bending kind of book, but it juggles all of these elements really well, and I found their juxtaposition to be really interesting in this book. How the creators navigated the storytelling within all of these different genres was just really a marvel for me. Really a fun time here, and if you're looking for something, again, a little bit off the beaten path, maybe check out Cover. It might be a random entry in your library, but I know it's a really fun one in mine. Next, we have an interesting kind of tie-in collection here. This is Marvel 1602, New World, and Fantastic Four by Peter David and Greg Pak. I really like this collection because it has some creators I really enjoy, like Peter David and Greg Pak, for example. Marvel 1602, for those that don't know, was a Marvel kind of event or mini-series, might be a better term, written by Neil Gaiman years ago. It's basically in a world where the whole Marvel universe began in 1602 rather than 1960 something or whenever it's supposed to canonically have kicked off. But it's really a fun look at kind of an old school re-envisioning of a Marvel universe. I really like that book. I did review it earlier in my days on this channel for those interested in a bit more about that miniseries, but there were some spin-off miniseries. You know, I also have a paperback that's kind of the Spider-Man Marvel 1602 miniseries, but yeah, this one collects New World and the Fantastic Four issues. To my memory, and it's been a while, Fantastic Four was mentioned in Marvel 1602, but something happened to those characters where I don't believe they were present in that miniseries, so it's fun to see them realized in this world through this little miniseries in this collected edition. The New World section, I believe, follows Peter Parker and some others as well. We have some great art, though, while not maybe exactly the same as the proper Marvel 1602 comic series, it's definitely reminiscent of that style. Character models are definitely familiar and feel like an extension of what we've already seen. So if you're a fan of that main series, some of these little spin-offs could be rather fun. I do think that this is a kind of random entry in my collection, as I don't always do tie-in collections. I mean, sometimes I get an omnibus that wraps it all in one, but it's rare that I'll buy the kind of spin-offs. I maybe did that earlier in my comic collecting journey, as probably is the case here, and over the years I just haven't been able to sell it. I think that this is just a really fun world, and I tried to get a lot of the paperbacks within it, just to, again, fill out that world a bit more. Marvel 1602 was definitely a creative venture, and to see more in that space can just be really fun. This is one I don't believe I've specifically reviewed on the channel, though again, I did review that main Marvel 1602 series. If for whatever reason you would like to see more on this title, let me know. I can see if I could do a review. It might be a little niche, but we can see what we can do. But yeah, this was really fun to find on the bookcase. I thought it was sort of random. I feel like Marvel 1602 in general is not overly discussed these days, and I do think that that one is really worth mentioning, but especially the spin-offs. Like, I don't think anyone really talks about this, but it has some really heavy hitters as far as creators, and I just thought it'd be a fun one to showcase and kind of promote a little bit more visually. And hey, while I have your attention, if you're enjoying this video and you've yet to subscribe to the channel, I would just like to invite you to do so. I'm always doing comic book list videos like this, reviews, unboxings, even a bit of live streams, and more. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's keep going with today's list. Next up, we have Phenomena, Book 1 by Brian Michael Bendis and Andre Lima Araujo. This was a really random entry in my collection as well. If you've been following the channel for a while, I did have an opportunity to review this and the book 2 in this series on behalf of Abrams Books. They were kind enough to send review copies, and I found myself kind of enjoying this work. I think why it's random for me is that this is definitely a young adult fantasy series, and as a kind of generality, I don't have a ton of young adult comics in my collection. Another novelty is that this entire work is in black and white, and it feels very manga-esque influenced, and maybe influenced by kind of European art styles in a really good way. I really like the design work we have from Araujo. It's absolutely gorgeous. This was my first exposure to this illustrator, and I found myself absolutely immersed in this incredible sandbox he built here. What I love about this too is I think the art really serves the overall vision of the story, and like all good science fiction or fantasy works, I think that we have some really key world building here, and I think a lot of that's done visually. I think that the world, again, constructed by Araujo here, is just so lived in and detailed and fascinating. Throughout this work, we have what feel like alien cultures or creatures, and we do feel very fish out of water. The whole central story for this series, which is, I think, slated to be a trilogy of these graphic novels. I think the third one is supposed to come out in 2025, question mark. The first two, again, are already out, but essentially the story is that some time ago there was sort of an event or a phenomenon that changed the world forever. And as a reader, you're kind of feeling like this is a very alien world or space, but the further you go, it has me asking questions like, is this Earth? Was this once Earth? What actually happened here? And 2 books in, I still don't fully know what that phenomenon was, although we do see little shapes or glimmers of what may come, going into what happened to this world. But we have a young boy, a young girl, and a kind of warrior-classed creature who band together to sort of right wrongs and basically kind of do little missions for each other. This is a really fun kind of ensemble team, young adult fantasy adventure, but again, it's a little bit random. It's off the beaten path for me. I read a lot of superhero comics, as longer-term fans of this channel may know, and some other kind of notable, smaller indie work, but again, young adult is a bit out of my wheelhouse, again, just in general. I do have a few others, like I'd consider Bone probably in that category from Jeff Smith, but again, this is a bit of a rarity, and it was one that came to my mind when I thought of this prompt. This is another one that, for whatever reason, even with heavy hitter comic creators here, I don't hear a lot of people discussing, and I'm not sure if that's because it's a young adult series or not, but for fans of that genre or those that going in with an open mind, this was still a really fun little venture to check out. I think especially if you have younger ones at home, this could also be a fun little gateway read for them into the world of comics, particularly if they don't like the standard superhero fare. Don't miss out on Phenomena. And last but certainly not least, to round out our list today, we have the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl Omnibus from Marvel Comics. And this is honestly one of the largest books in my collection. This is one massive tome collecting so much of the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl mythos, and this is definitely a random book. I don't know if I was the target demographic for this release or not, but this was a title I was very curious in after seeing Squirrel Girl appear in Chip Zdarsky's Howard the Duck in one of the storylines. She seemed fun, energetic, and a little bit offbeat, and when I found out she had her own omnibus, I just thought it looked like a great read. Now, admittedly, I am still making my way through this just massive book. Yes, once again, I will say it is a huge collection, and it also stands out as just being a really interesting piece in my library. I don't really have much like it. I know Gwenpool is also a bit comedic and offbeat as well, but this one to me felt even more random. I had no real ties to this character, again, other than seeing her show up in Howard the Duck, but that was enough to launch me into this book here, and so far it's a really fun read. Squirrel Girl is very quirky, but extremely likable, at least to me. She is unbeatable, as they say in the title, but what that means is a little bit funny as you navigate your way through. As far as something unique about this collection as well, we have the creators having their own kind of footnotes at the bottom of each page of these comics, which really make it feel like a longer reading experience, as those notes can sometimes feed off the narrative in the panels, have their own discussion, or just provide kind of meta commentary to the audience. The feeling of that is almost like the narrator is breaking the fourth wall with a kind of direct address, but it is fun. It is also kind of an extension of sort of the asterisk editorial notes you'll see in comic books a lot, referencing older issues. But that is a fun convention I see throughout the run here, in addition to really expansive and detailed letter pages, which we don't always see with modern series, but those are definitely in these issues here. And again, the collection is just massive. The art style is very poppy and kind of cartoon-like in a way, and again, I just think it sets itself apart from a lot of the other comic book fare, especially those that I have from Marvel Comics. I do think this is a fun collection, though. Again, it might not be for everyone, but I went in with as open a mind as I could, and I find myself really enjoying what I've read. We have so many Marvel characters showcased throughout this book, so many Easter eggs, and you really feel like Squirrel Girl, reading this run, you feel like she's an essential ingredient in the Marvel Universe, even though she's maybe not touched upon too much in other titles. But again, it just feels like a random entry. I look at my list of omnibuses and I feel like all of them fall into one category or another, and yet Squirrel Girl is really set apart as something all her own. Have you read Squirrel Girl? I would love more commentary on this book as I make my way through. Do we have Squirrel Girl fans watching? Again, would like to know all of that, but this was a fun one for me, but definitely a random one in my library. Okay, and with that, we're already going to wrap up our 5 most random comic book collections in my library. I again wanted to showcase something a little bit different than the standard books I feel like I show sometimes, multiple times. I know a lot of you who watch like to see new aspects in the collection or new books in rotation, and I was trying to think of a prompt where I could showcase some of the most lesser seen books in my collection, and this is it. These are my random books. Some of them are really fun, some I'm still making my way through, but I think they are all worth showcasing in their way. I do have a request, and maybe this is a bit silly, but I'd like to know, what are some of the most random comic books in your collection? I don't know how we defined randomness. Maybe they feel off the beaten path for you, or something that just feels like an odder end that no one really talks about, or you look at it and you're like, why is this here? Why do I like this? Why is this set apart? I would honestly love to hear those recommendations in the comments below. I think this could be a really great way to find not only hidden gems, but those like second or third tier comic collections that are maybe not on anyone's top 10 lists, but are still worth reading in their own way, even if they're a bit random or don't fit nicely in other kind of boxes or categories. But anyway, let me know what you think. I would love to again see a great recommendation list going in the comments. You guys are so awesome at doing those. I've gotten so many great recommendations from you guys over the years. And thank you so much for watching. This has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to leave your like, that comment we talked about, and maybe share this video with a friend. Thank you so much. Have a good one.